Hi, everyone, and welcome to Quantum Portals. My name is Crystal, and today we have an amazing guest on our show. His name is Vincent Ortegon, and he is a writer living in Chicago. And he has written a number of books on Edgar Cayce. And today we'll be talking about one of those books called Edgar Cayce and Psychic Astrology. And we're going to learn all about astrology and how Edgar Cayce viewed astrology and what he thought about it. Welcome, Vincent. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So let's just get into it. So tell me more about the Vince. Tell me more about Edgar Cayce and how in his approach to astrology. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Just a background is
Hmm.
I started researching Edgar
Hmm.
Cayce in 2018.
Hmm.
I started looking into him, and I became a member of his organization, and I gained access to all his psychic readings. So over the course of 40 plus years, he gave an upwards of 14,000 psychic readings. So I started to investigate his readings. So I started to look at various topics he spoke about. I researched his readings on religion, his really readings on various topics, and I started looking into his readings on astrology. So for the first 20 years of giving psychic readings, they were all medical related. So sick people would come to him. He discovered he had this ability to go into a trance and he would heal all these people. So for the first 20 years of giving psychic readings, they were all about medicine. They were all about diagnosing ailments and sickness in people, and he would heal them. So 20 years went by, and then once his notoriety grew, people started coming to him and asking questions that were not related to medicine. People started asking questions about past lives and the soul and the subconscious. So eventually, people started asking him about questions related to astrology. He went on about it. He spoke all about the planets. He spoke about how it's all related to our past lives and those kind of things. So in the beginning, when these topics came up, he was kind of unsettled about this astrological information because him and his family, they were conservative Christians.
Hmm.
So when this information about astrology came along, he was kind of uncomfortable. But
Hmm.
as time went on, he expanded upon it all,
Yeah.
and he
Well, he
came
was a
to
devout
accept it.
Christian, right? Like I think he was a Sunday school teacher, wasn't he? Like, because I know in the
He
Christian
was, yeah.
religion, the idea of astrology is seen as something a little less, I mean, I don't know, work of the devil or anything, but it's definitely seen as something a lot less, less upstanding, as it were, you know?
Correct. Yeah. In Christianity, you kind of have these occult ideas with astrology, but
Mhm.
if you look in the Bible, there are several references to astrology. But
Okay.
overall, yeah, Casey was a devout Christian. He was a Sunday school teacher, so when these concepts of astrology surfaced, it was kind of foreign territory.
Mhm. Well, that's great. So, let's start with it. So, in terms of Edgar Cayce's approach to astrology, are we talking about the signs? Are we talking about planets? How does the astrology come about with Edgar Cayce? How does he see it?
Yeah. So he was at one point he was asked the question,
Hmm.
"What is the definition of astrology?" And he said that in the beginning, the earth was set in motion and that the planets began the ruling of the destiny of all matters. So again, he said that the earth existed and that the planets became the ruling forces. So these planets that we see in the sky, Mars, Jupiter, Venus, call them the archons or call them the gods of ancient Rome and Greece. These things were ruling, and that's what Casey's definition of the ruling of these planetary forces upon man and upon Earth.
Hmm. So, would you say that these planets, in that perspective, would you say that the planets affect us? And if they do, how do they affect us exactly?
Yes, according to him, they affect us greatly. So he says that every person born, every single individual is affected by these planets. So we take on all these emotional characteristics based on the planets.
So, so is there any other aspects about the effects of astrology on human beings in terms of Edgar Cayce's perspective?
Yeah, so he says, they affect our emotions, They affect our urges, our inclinations. They even affect us physically. They may bring ailments to the mind. Like, for example, Saturn, someone who's a Capricorn,
Mhm.
they possess this very driven desire from Saturn, but also Saturn can bring depression.
Mhm.
For example, he says that Mars brings this, again, a desire to succeed, but it also brings madness. He spoke
Mhm.
of Mars bringing this madness to people, this almost insanity. And he actually
Mhm.
said that people who become murderers are more inclined to have had a sojourn in Mars, and they
Mhm.
possess this rage and this anger from Mars. And someone who, sojourned in Venus, someone who has those characteristics of Venus, they possess the love of nature, the love of
Mhm.
beauty, the love of friendships, the love of nature
Okay.
kinds of aspects.
Yeah. So I noticed you mentioned the word sojourns. What are sojourns exactly in relation to astrology?
Yeah, so he talks about these planetary sojourns, or I call them these planetary journeys or planetary trips. So according to the Edgar Cayce material, when a soul passes from the Earth, it travels to these other planets. It enters these other planetary dimensions, just like we're on the Earth here.
Hmm.
We are on a planet here in the solar system. We are in the third dimension, right?
Okay.
We're in the third dimension. But
Okay.
according to Casey, we go to Venus, we go
Hmm.
to Mars, we go to Jupiter, we go to
Hmm.
all these other planets, and we enter those planetary dimensions. And it's kind of hard to fathom what it's like. But he says, for example, this is the third dimension on Earth. He said we go to Mars. There may be only one dimension in Mars. There may be four dimensions in Venus. There may be eight
Hmm.
dimensions in Jupiter. So Casey says that we sojourn to
Hmm.
the other planets. We're entering those different realms. Just like on Earth here, we're experiencing the Earth. We go experience Venus for a time. We go experience Neptune, and we're
Hmm.
making our rounds throughout the solar system, and we're gaining in experiences, and we're experiencing those other planetary realms. And this is all necessary for our soul development.
Okay. So would you say that there are other types of dimensions? Like, so not everybody, because I mean, there's a lot of talk in science about how there are maybe 10, maybe 12, 20 dimensions, 21 dimensions, that sort of thing. So it's not very clear. Was Edgar Cayce talking about different dimensions when you're going to different planets? What was he saying?
Yeah. He does talk about these different dimensions, and um, it may be hard to fathom what these dimensions entail, because we know what Earth is like. We can
Mhm.
experience sight, sound, taste, touch, but these other dimensions, it's kind of hard to imagine, right? What it's like because we can't experience that. But he says that these other dimensions can be similar to dreams that we have or
Okay.
state when we go into a trance or something
Hmm.
like that. He says that these other planetary sojourns are related to those deep mental forces that come from meditation. When we
Hmm.
go into meditation, we transcend our bodies. When we dream,
Hmm.
we transcend. We're going to these other dimensions when we
Hmm.
arrest the body and we ascend to these other realms. So
Well,
that's kind of similar. Not
okay.
exactly, but
Hmm.
it can be relatable to what these other dimensions are like.
Well, it's kind of interesting because the idea of dreams is there's nothing that really sort of holds us down in terms of dreams because there is no real dimensional reality. I mean, based on what some people have said, and also some people who have worked with medicinal plants, like who've done ayahuasca or this type of thing, they often talk about how they move to different dimensions, or they see colors, or they see things at different levels that they can't really see here, and that they're actually beings at those other dimensions. So that's kind of interesting because it's talked about by people who work with plant medicine. I don't know if you
Exactly.
had a comment on that.
Yeah, and you hear people having whether it's a near-death experience or again,
Hmm.
like I said, taking a substance to make you have an out-of-body experience, and you hear people talk about, oh, I saw colors
Hmm.
that don't exist on Earth. Well, can you describe that color? No, you can't because you just can't. We're limited in the third dimension on what we can
Hmm.
see. But these people say that there are thousands of other colors that exist. They see and experience things that we don't know on Earth. So again, these other dimensions, it's hard to fathom. You have to go there and you have to experience it. But there is an array of different experiences and different things to embody in these other dimensions.
Hmm. So that's interesting. But as you know, with astrology, there's the influences of each planet. There's influences of different constellations. So with astrology and how Edgar Cayce saw it, did he talk about the influence of each planet or how it related to different signs? I mean, for example, through Western astrology, I mean, a planet will be associated with a particular sign. How was it for Edgar Cayce?
Yeah, so again, he talks about these planetary sojourns. So we're going to all these different planets, and when we go to these planets, we are taking on certain characteristics. For example, so when we sojourn to Mercury, and we come back to Earth, he says that there's a ton of readings that relate Mercury to having high mental abilities. He talks about having high mental abilities with Mercury all the time. So when someone goes to Mercury, what does that mean? That they inherit a high attention to detail. Something like mathematics, someone who's involved with a job with like data analyzation. These kind of aspects come from Mercury. So like the two zodiac signs under the rule of Mercury would be like, Gemini and Virgo. So again, individuals with these signs will be good in like analytical thinking, things that require minute detail, precision. That's what Mercury is all about.
So would you say, would you be able to go through each planet and tell us like which, what each planet represents or
Yeah,
in relation to each sign?
definitely. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
Venus, when we sojourn to Venus and we come back to Earth, so we then have aspects of beauty. We inherit these feelings of love and romance. That's what we get from Venus. So, someone who is a Libra or a Taurus, for example, they gain these deep aspects of like love due to their sojourn in Venus. And someone, for example, who is an Aries, who has the ruling planet of Mars, those are those people who inherit those feelings of like intense anger, rage. People who come back from Mars, they have these feelings of wrath. So that's what Mars brings. When we sojourn to Jupiter, we then develop characteristics of nobleness and cheerfulness. Casey talks all about Jupiter delivering these feelings of cheerfulness and nobleness. So someone who's a Sagittarius
Like
will
me.
you are a Sagittarius. So
Yeah.
that's why you have so much strength and cheerfulness and nobleness.
Okay. Thank you.
You got all that from Jupiter.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just to move along,
Hmm.
Saturn. So in Saturn, Casey says that we obtain feelings of extreme discipline and the drive to succeed. He gives a reading where he says in Saturn we find that the inclination for the climbing in all aspects of life, and that's what traditional astrology says, right? The Capricorn
Hmm.
is driven to succeed,
Hmm.
and Casey corresponds with ideas of the traditional view of the
Hmm.
Capricorns.
What's
Um,
your sign, by the way? Now that we're speaking of astrology, what is your sign, Vincent?
I am a Capricorn as well. Yep.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so you're climbing and climbing more books and more knowledge for you.
Yep. Thank you, Saturn, for all those
Yeah.
drives to move forward.
And so the next planet?
Yeah. So in Uranus, Casey says that we take on aspects of mysticism and the occult, psychic influences. This is what Uranus brings. So things like numerology, again, psychic abilities. So a person with the sign of Aquarius will have these deep interests in mystic and occult interests. Moving forward, the planet Neptune also brings an interest in mysticism and the occult. Casey says that Neptune brings the drive to study, the drive to research, the drive to write. Also, Casey links Neptune with water. So
Hmm.
there's like over 100 readings where Casey links Neptune directly with water. So someone who is a Pisces,
Hmm.
for example, will be very drawn towards water in their life. And Casey says that water is a very powerful influence for a lot of people, especially someone, who is a Pisces.
So what's interesting about the planets is that, especially this year, is that around November 20th, you will have Pluto moving into Aquarius. And that's going to bring about a lot of change on this planet. And I know that a lot of people, a lot of astrologers are very excited about this because this is really where we enter into the real age of Aquarius. This is really it, like, the song Age of Aquarius, all that. That's what's really going to be happening. And it's going to really bring about a lot of change in terms of how people interact with each other. It's going to hopefully raise the vibration of the planet. And it's also going to bring about a lot more interest in esoteric and occult topics. So I think that's going to be a good thing because I think that the planet needs to sort of move away from a lot of the darkness that we've been experiencing and moving more towards maybe ascension and different types of interest. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, we're going to be entering the age of Aquarius, and Pluto is moving into Aquarius.
Hmm.
Cayce had said that when he gave his reading that over the next 100 to 200 years, Pluto is going to have a big influence over the world. And he said this is going to bring spiritual minded influences, which definitely
Exactly.
plus.
Hmm.
But the age of Aquarius and Pluto moving into Aquarius, this is going to bring big transformations in
Hmm.
society as a whole. There's going to be huge advancements in
Hmm.
technology. There's going to be a technological revolution, which is already happening.
Hmm.
We can
Yeah.
see it every day.
Hmm.
Pluto and Aquarius, it's going to deliver advancements in science. There's going to be big changes in, areas of politics and humanitarianism.
Hmm.
So people
Yeah, and
are going to be
travel and
very
all that. It's going to be really
in
big here.
travel, it's going to give people a drive. People are going to be very career oriented, very
Hmm.
driven in both their professional and
Hmm.
personal life. So there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see, as we were talking before, there's always a shadow side to everything. And so you are going to see a rise of AI. And
Yeah.
there might be, and also I think that with Pluto, sometimes a bit of an illusion as well, illusion aspects. So it's going to be hard to sort of tell what's real and what isn't. That is some of some of the effects of Pluto. But I think that if we really are paying attention and we're clear and we focus on the positive, we can really sort of try to transcend a lot of the so-called shadow side and focus more and gain more from the positive aspects of Pluto moving into Aquarius. And another big thing coming up, another thing that astrologers are also excited about is next year we're going to have Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. And it's I know that with Aries, sometimes you sort of see it as the god of war and a lot of aggression, but I think it's also that Aries is the sign of advancement as well, but also about of action and about energy and about putting things into motion. And so maybe, just maybe, we can take a lot of the positive and the um, spiritual aspects that we're going to have from Pluto and have it even more enhanced when Saturn and Neptune go into Aries. So it's really going to be big
Absolutely.
transformations. And I know a lot of people are talking about how the planet is going to look so different in the next 2 to 3 years compared to what we have now. It's going to be completely revolutionized. So we should definitely have this talk again in about 3 years to see
Yeah.
some of the changes that have taken place. So that's interesting about the planets. But apart from the planets, did Edgar Cayce also talk about the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations? Do those also affect us in his aspect of astrology?
Yeah, absolutely. Casey said, of course, all these planets affect us. They give us good and bad aspects. However, Casey said that the strongest force in the destiny of man is the sun first, and
Okay.
then the closer planets coming into ascension at the time of a
Hmm.
person's birth. So the sun is the strongest force. That's number one. In terms of the moon, Casey said that the moon brings change. The moon heavily affects our emotions. The moon affects our affairs with people, social relationships. The moon also affects family relationships and even affects the marriage between couples, he
Hmm.
said. Another thing about the moon, he said that the moon can bring incredible streaks of good luck.
Okay.
He once told the doctor to search for buried treasure,
Hmm.
to search for silver on the third or sixth day following the start of the new moon. So there's a good omen with the moon.
Okay,
Uh,
good. So I think the moon's actually sort of I'm not sure if the moon is full or new, but if it is, I'll definitely be looking for buried treasure.
go look for treasure when the moon's in that certain phase. You're gonna find some treasure. That's
Exactly.
so yeah. So you mentioned the stars. So Casey talks about the stars quite a bit. He mentions the constellation. He talks about the Big Dipper. He talks about the Little Dipper. He alludes to, he calls it the Dog Star, which is Canis Major. He also talks about Polaris and the North Star. One of the most popular stars that Casey talked about, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, is Arcturus. So Arcturus was huge. So he talked about Arcturus quite a bit. So according to Edgar Cayce, the star Arcturus acts as a celestial gateway. He says that Arcturus is the doorway out of the system. So he
Wow.
said that once a soul reaches a certain level of development, once we develop enough in mind, body, and spirit,
Mhm.
we go to Arcturus. We could travel to Arcturus, which leads to those higher realms. It is the literal doorway out of this universal cosmic system.
Wow.
Yeah,
So that's interesting. That has a sort of a, how should I say, reincarnation type of connotation there, because part of reincarnation is to trying to escape the constant mortal coil of coming and being reborn again. And that's interesting. So if we're moving on to the next level, we should be looking for Arcturus since there's a doorway out, this way,
absolutely.
the doorway left,
Right. And
as
so
it
it's
were.
interesting enough, Casey once gave a reading for she was a woman who worked for his organization. She was a stenographer, and he gave a
Hmm.
past life reading for this woman.
Hmm.
And he said that this woman, he told her, he goes, this entity gained in soul development. She reached those high levels. She gained so much in her lives, in her past lives. She attained that realm of Arcturus. She
Hmm.
got there. But
Wow.
once she got there, she decided to come back to the earth because she had more work to do. She came back to the earth to help Edgar and his wife Gertrude with all the psychic information. She was a stenographer. So he
Okay.
said that entity attained that realm of Arcturus but chose to come back
Oh boy,
because
I
they
don't know if I'd come back. I
yeah,
think
who
I'd be
would?
out of here. Bye.
Who would? You want out of the system, but
Yeah, I
some
know.
people,
Yeah, I think I want to go somewhere
like a
else.
lot of people, they have more work to be done. They have to come back.
Okay.
A lot of people choose
Hmm.
to come back. They choose to take on the earth. They choose to come to this hard realm and to continue their work for a purpose.
Okay. Well, to each his own, eh?
Yeah, I
But
know.
getting back to Edgar Cayce and in particular about his devout Christianity, did he ever talk about astrology in the Bible, or because I know you mentioned it very briefly, or about Jesus, or about any other of the saints, if anybody followed about astrology?
Yeah, so he was asked the question, when was astrology first used and when was the first record of astrology? And according to him, he said the first record is in the book of Job,
Okay.
and Job lived before Moses.
Mhm.
So yeah, throughout the Bible, if you look at the book of Psalms, it says that God determines the number of stars. If you look in the New Testament, you have the wise men. They're studying the stars. They're studying the Star of Bethlehem to find Jesus.
Hmm.
Yeah, Casey definitely spoke a lot about the Christianity in relation to astrology. And interestingly enough, he was asked the question about Jesus, and apparently Jesus was a part of the Essene community. A lot of people have heard of
Hmm.
the
Yeah, exactly.
and Jesus, as a young boy, he was a part of the Essenes, and he studied under a woman by the name of Judy, and she was a leader of the Essenes. And according to Casey,
Wow.
the question was asked to Casey, what subjects did Judy, the teacher, have him study before he
Hmm.
and he said that he studied astrology under Judy before he ventured to India, Persia, and Egypt. So Jesus studied astrology.
Well, it's interesting that he would study under the Essenes and Judy, and also if he went to the East, I'm sure he also would have been exposed to, for example, Vedic astrology in India or astrology in other parts of the world. But in getting to that, though, does Edgar Cayce talk about astrology in other parts of the world? Because astrology was also, I think, in different parts of the Far East, no?
Correct. Yeah, he tells us to study the ancient cultures.
Hmm.
And one of those ancient cultures were the Chaldeans. and they originally lived in the south of Babylon. And the Chaldeans were experts in astrology.
Hmm.
So, they were the Babylonians. So the teachings of the Babylonians laid the groundwork for astrology, which trickled over to the Greeks and the Egyptians. So the
Hmm.
Chaldeans were huge with astrology. So Casey also told us to study the astrology of the ancient Chinese race.
Hmm.
He also told us to study a Persian astrology, and he emphasized the importance of Persian astrology, which is related to Zoroastrianism, which is one of the first monotheistic religions. So Zoroastrianism talks a lot about the creation of the universe in relation to the
Hmm.
planets and the stars. So Zoroastrianism was huge.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because if you think about the story of when Jesus was born, the three wise men, they actually used astrology. They used astrology to find the star and the star of Bethlehem, to follow the star and to find Jesus as he was being born in a manger. So there's actually, I guess that answers my question in terms of like astrology being used in the Bible. That's
Exactly.
actually kind of interesting.
He talked all about the Essenes, and he actually gave us some insight into the meetings. They would have these secret meetings, and Casey was able to see what their meetings were like. And he told us the Essenes, they would sit in a circle and they would talk about the prophecies, and they would try and figure out when the Messiah is coming. They would study the ancient scriptures, they would study the stars, and Casey said that it was the position of the North Star.
Hmm.
And so they finally figured it out. They figured out the celestial signs, and
Hmm.
that's what started their understanding of when the Messiah would come. So yeah,
Hmm.
things were huge into astrology, and that's what led to
Hmm.
the Star of Bethlehem and all that.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So we've talked about astrology and its different perspectives, but did Edgar Cayce ever talk about astrology for himself? I mean, even though I know he was a devout Christian and didn't really want to talk about stuff like that, do we ha what can we say about Edgar Cayce's chart for himself?
Yeah, so he gave his own past life reading.
Okay.
Edgar Cayce, he was born on March 18th, 1877, around
Hmm.
3 p.m. near Hopkinsville, Kentucky. So the planet closest to his ascendant was Uranus. So the readings say that his soul, in fact, took its flight to the Earth from Uranus. And he definitely had these, Uranian characteristics, like the psychic abilities. Obviously, he
Hmm.
was the greatest psychic in the world, and he had this Uranian influence of the psychic. It also said he said that he had these ultra forces in Uranus and Neptune. He had strength from Jupiter and Mercury. He had some afflictions in Mars, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Gemini Sun, and the Moon. He had Mercury conjunct Saturn, which made him very disciplined. He was well disciplined.
Hmm.
He also had Saturn conjunct Venus, which gave him emotional stability. Edgar had the Sun in the eighth house, which brought an interest in health and healing, again, occult influences and secrets of life and death. So he also had Saturn in Pisces, which delivers the urge to provide help to people. And that's exactly what he did throughout his life. He
Hmm.
provided help to thousands of people and healed all
Hmm.
individuals. So all these astrological aspects from his birth chart definitely played a role in his life as Edgar Cayce as a
Hmm.
psychic.
Okay, so just to close things off, I know we touched upon Edgar Cayce talking about mankind, but so my hope is that with the changes coming into Aquarius, that we'll be able to see in our lifetime some of the positive changes. Did you ever expand more on that, or?
Yeah, he talked about a lot of changes that are going to happen. And again, he was a prophet, so he gave all these prophecies.
Mhm.
In 1932, he said that a chamber of records would be discovered under the right paw of the Sphinx in Egypt. And when this
Mhm.
happens, this is going to mark the beginning of what he called the fifth root race. And when
Wow.
the fifth root race comes, it's going to bring, huge changes to man's experience on Earth.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's sort of where we're at, right? Because like, I mean, I don't know. There's some people have talked about the Holo records already being discovered, some not.
yeah,
If this, I mean, if Pluto is going to be coming in to Aquarius in November, then maybe this is sort of where we're going to have more I don't know, people talking about the Hall of Records being discovered. Because I've heard about that before, but they said they hadn't discovered it yet. So if it is going to bring about the fifth root race, then hopefully it'll be this November. If it is, then we can definitely
fingers.
talk across our fingers and we can come back and talk about it. Did you say anything else?
Yeah, and he said too that certain conditions have to happen on the Earth before
Hmm.
the discoveries happen, before
Okay.
before this chamber of records is discovered. And he said when that happens, certain conditions first have to be met, and then when this discovery happens, this is when the fifth root race is going to come to fruition.
Okay. Wow. Well, that is really, really fascinating. And wow, I've learned a lot today. And so, for our viewers, if you're interested in finding out more about Edgar Cayce and psychic astrology, please pick up a book by Vincent Ortegon. It's on sale on Amazon.com. And you can also see the link here, link down below to get to the book. And I just want to say thank you again, Vincent, for coming here today and talking to us about Edgar Cayce. And really looking forward to seeing you again. And like I said, I think in a couple of years we should come back and talk again and see how what kind of changes have come about since we last spoke. So
Absolutely,
I hope we'll see each other then. In any
absolutely.
case, thank you again, Vince, for coming by. And thank you again for all my members at Quantum Portals. And we'll see you next time with a whole new video. Take care.